Ex-Americans of Reddit, how has your life changed since moving out of the US? I've lived in several different countries, so the changes were different in each one. The one major / constant one is that I travel a lot more now. Not because I have some sort of passion for travel, or because I feel like I missed out on it living in the US. I traveled a lot as a kid. It's just so damn easy that it's not even much of a thought. Traveling outside of your state is a hassle, but outside of the US, that's a major trip. Traveling to a neighboring country now is a 1 to 2 hour train and I'm in a completely different culture, with a different language, different food, etc. Europe, Canada. Lol, 1 to 2 hour train ride in Toronto gets you to somewhere else in Toronto. A 2-hour flight from pretty much anywhere in Canada doesn't really get you anywhere all that different. The only other country you could go to is America, but you probably can't even get as far as the southern states. You can maybe get 2 provinces over, depending on where you are. I'm still American, but living in West / Central Africa since 2007. Negatives about being here: there's not the variety of restaurants found in the States. Healthcare often isn't very good, though it is really cheap. Root canal $80 for example. Many cities don't offer a wide range of activities either. Positives: I can afford a housekeeper twice a week to clean the place and do laundry. Restaurants and bars are really cheap. 24 ounces. Beer is $1. People are very social and easy to meet. There really isn't a lot to spend money on, so I save quite a bit of my salary. I can piss alongside of the road if I need to and nobody cares. Moved to Switzerland 5 years ago. The biggest difference is that there is more vacation time and higher salaries. This causes lower stress in general. People are always talking about their next holiday. In fact, it's hard to get together with friends sometimes because someone is always on holiday. Less road rage and better drivers, and public transit goes absolutely everywhere. We drive much less here and didn't have a car for the first 3 years. Subsidized preschool, Spielgruppe, no school on Wednesdays, 2-hour lunch breaks. All the shops are closed on Sundays and holidays. No Mexican food. We cook a lot more because eating out is incredibly expensive. We also lost about 10 pounds each from walking everywhere / eating better. My friend moved from Germany to Switzerland and is always complaining how little vacation time she gets. Yeah, German average is higher than in Switzerland. Had 30 days in Germany. Now I'm at 20. Depends in the company. Most I had was 28 days. Holy balls, in the US, I get 1 hour per work week. So 5 work days in a year. I'm so in the wrong country. I've lived in a few countries outside of the US: Romania, Moldova, Bulgaria, and Georgia, the Republic. Main everyday benefits are public transportation is really easy, convenient, and cheap to use every day. I also eat out a lot more because it's much cheaper and more relaxed. I haven't had to deal with health stuff much, but when I have, it's awesome and life changing. For example, I recently partially dislocated my shoulder and I'm able to afford out-of-pocket service at one of the best physical therapists in my city. In the US, I can't afford insurance and would just not see a doctor since it isn't extremely painful or life-threatening. Isn't it crazy to just go to the doctor? Something really insane here is that you can actually call a doctor and ask them how much stuff costs. In the US, due to how they price things, it's never really a clear thing. I still have a kind of instinct to not go to the doctor, but I called the physical therapist here, asked them the price for a checkup, and it's under $20. In Bulgaria I had a $280 dental bill and was like, what the hell? I thought this should have been cheap, but I looked up the average US price. $900. $280 is an expensive dental bill for Bulgaria, unless you had extensive work done, or went to an overpriced dentist. Not me, but my brother. He moved to Austria and loves it there. One thing that's changed though is that it's absolutely fucked up how he speaks English. Has learned a lot of German, but English is so widespread over there it's still what he usually uses. But all the people he talks to have a somewhat thick accent when they speak it, which has kind of adopted over time. He has to put a lot of effort into how he talks when Skyping with our mom, or she can't understand a word he says. A friend of mine was living in Asia, and I was joking with him that he had learned broken English as a second language. It was out of necessity though. They had a young guy who was a driver and sort of all around helper for their house, and if my friend said to him something as simple as, "Hey, what time do you think you're gonna be back from running those errands?" it would zoom past him. Instead he'd say something like, "You, what time home?" and he'd get the answer. My wife is Chinese, and there's so much truth to this. We met when we were 19, and she came to the US as an exchange student 2 years prior. Her English was okay, but definitely her English. So I constantly found myself switching up my verbiage to match hers. As an English major at the time, you can presume how vast the difference was. This was 11 over 12 years ago. Her English is nearly perfect now, but her accent remains. The good thing is I don't have to simplify my lexicon much anymore. I was living in Hong Kong for a few years, but returned due to the protests. The best things were public transit, having fast, reliable public transit and just getting on a double-decker bus after work and spacing out on my phone, or jumping on a train and being on a beautiful mountain ready to hike within 40 minutes was amazing. The food was incredible. I think a lot of Westerners go and get pizza or pasta or whatever they are used to, but it's expensive and not very good. The little dumpling shops and random Sichuan noodle places though can't be beat. And of course healthcare. There's an inexpensive public option that you have to wait for, and also an expensive private option that still has to compete with the public option. So the prices aren't bad at all even with the private doctors, and you get something for the extra cost. I never waited more than a couple minutes for a scheduled appointment, and the care was far superior to anything I've ever dealt with in the US. A visit for food poisoning and flu ran me $45 USD with prescriptions, $80 USD for the dentist, $700 USD for 3 months of Concerta and a meeting with a specialist. Now I'm back in the US. My wife had to go to an appointment at the nicer local hospital. We waited for an hour in a dirty waiting room with furniture that's falling apart for a scheduled appointment that lasted all of 15 minutes, and talked to the doctor for just 2 minutes. $650 without any medications. Sorry to hear you had to leave HK. I've visited a few times and feel like it's somewhere I'd really love to live. The transit, food, atmosphere and access to all the good parts of both city and nature are huge draws. But sadly it looks like that won't be happening for some time. What a special place. Still American. Been living in Barcelona for 17 years. On balance it's been a great experience. Mostly as a result of sheer luck I wound up in a place where my shortcomings weren't as big of a problem as they were back in Seattle. And I really came out of my shell. I discovered new talents, started a successful business, met a nice boy, fell in love and got married. How has my life changed? Well, I have fairly severe AD, and that kept me from being successful in my chosen profession. Here I found a passion for hospitality and opened a burger place that has now become a top-rated mini chain in the country. Due to the high cost of opening a business like that in the US, I never would have been able to manage it. Here I did. Quality of life is better in general, good free healthcare, public transport everywhere, awesome food and wine, great climate and weather. Cost of living is generally pretty low compared to the US, even though I'm in one of the most expensive real estate markets in the country. On the other hand, something I've noticed and discussed with my American friends is that by comparison, life here is harder than the US, depending on where you are there. By hard I mean so much is a hassle. Those cute mom and pop stores here are great until you actually need to buy something and have to go to 6 places and they are all out of it because they only stock one, so you've wasted half a day and still won't get the thing you need until next week. So much paperwork and bureaucracy. City governments and state agencies with entire hierarchies of functionaries who only exist to prevent you from doing what you need to do. So many lines to stand in. Supermarkets that are anything but super and keep bankers' hours. Sky high taxes. It costs thousands of euros in the better part of a year to get a driver's license here. But everyone drives like a drunken toddler, so what was the point? I could go on. Life here is great, but I suspect we'll wind up back in the US in a few years. OMG, from looking at your username I've just realized that my ex-husband and I have eaten many a time at your restaurant. We used to love it when we lived in Sitges. Your pecan pie was extraordinary and the burgers were always cooked to perfection. How funny to run into you here on Reddit, haha. What's the name of the restaurant? Bagels. Cheers. Looks like I'm just down the road actually. I'll call in when this blows over. I'm still an American, but I have been living outside of the US for the better part of the last decade. It's nice to have affordable medical insurance and to be able to go to the doctor without worrying about the price. It's also nice to have amazing and affordable public transportation. Not just in my city, but throughout the whole country. Other positives include low crime, clean cities, not a ton of aggressive homeless people. Apartments are also extremely affordable, even in the most desirable parts of town. On the downside, I'll always be a foreigner here, and the air pollution is way worse here than in the US. Also, fresh produce is way more expensive here than it is back home. Korea, you win. I didn't realize Korea had a pollution issue. It can get pretty bad. There are high levels of PM2.5 for a lot of the year. Today it is only in the 30s, but it regularly climbs into the 100 to 150 range here. I'm a Norwegian American and I have lived in Iceland, Norway, and the Faroe Islands. I'm now living in Moscow, Russia, waiting for my residency to be processed. The main change from moving from the States to Russia is the availability to great healthcare without buying health insurance. I had an MRI done for $20 and they gave me a thumb drive of the scans, so I can take it to whichever other clinic I might want to. Then I had 3 ultrasounds during one session, with blood work, and it'll only cost around $45. These appointments were all done on the same day I called to make them, and within a 5-mile radius of my home. This was all with a private healthcare clinic too, which is more expensive than just the state-run healthcare. So yeah, it's amazing to have that. It's also nice to be able to buy a nice apartment and summer house without taking a mortgage. I'll just add that life in Russia is much more similar to the United States than it ever was while living in the Nordic countries that I had lived in. Enjoy the Datra lifestyle. My life is good. I expected the language and culture. Didn't expect that I'd be happier here honestly, but I'm happier and can smile more. Moved us to Germany. A friend of mine went into the US Army and ended up marrying a German girl. When he got out they came back to live in the US for a year or so, but realized that they were happier and better off in Germany. He had to get serious about learning the language, but became fluent fairly quickly once he needed to use it most of the day as opposed to when he was on the base. I'm living in Germany. What I love is the city is designed for people. There's a park every couple of blocks. The sidewalks are super wide and well maintained. Bike lanes are well observed by drivers. Well marked. Everything. Going to the doctor is awesome. I rarely need to go, but they can fit me in right away. Right referrals. And I still don't know what I paid. I never want to live in the US again. Not till they fix the system. Germany has 2 or 3 months of paid sick leave and it's super difficult to fire an employee. I have the season peace of mind. I don't have to worry about illness or injury ruining my life. I really miss salsa, fish tacos, and dill pickles, but the finest chocolate is cheaper than the US cheap stuff. I'll accept that trade. Oh, other bonus, groceries are subsidized. It's about 20% cheaper to buy good food. Seeing the affordable food prices reminds me I'm living in a government that cares about its people. I can live without a car. I can fly all over Europe for super cheap. We travel once a month now. I feel like I'm living an extravagant lifestyle, but our income hasn't increased that much. I no longer have to determine if I'm sick enough to go to the doctor or because of costs. Medical treatment here is almost entirely covered by taxes, and it's an amazing feeling after living in the US. I won't lose my savings if I get cancer or have a car accident. If I don't feel well, I just pop down to my doctor for a free visit. Yes, I know nothing is truly free. I have more free time and less stress. Work-life balance is valued more here. No one questions or cares if I take a sick day or need time to go to an appointment. I'm able to pursue hobbies and have a decent social life without other areas of my life being impacted. Life is just more laid back. It took me about 5 years to adjust to it, but I've fully embraced it now. When I visit the US, I'm always very glad that I no longer live there. But what country though? Australia. Left the US years ago. Still an American, since it's a long process to get new citizenship and I like having options. I moved to Japan. I was able to buy a house in the countryside that was a decent price. I'm able to afford a house, a car and a kid on a single income. I can afford going to the doctor, which is cool. For the most part, it's easy to get Western media such as Netflix and Disney Deluxe. Food is crazy expensive. Like a $1 for a single apple, or heaven forbid, if I want watermelon. Lived in Japan most of my life, and one thing I do miss is safety. Like in Japan, unless you're a kid or woman, a grown man wouldn't be too afraid to be walking outside at 2 AM on an unfamiliar street. In the US, it's a good way to get mugged or worse. Still American, but I have lived in England for 16 years. I have a better job here than what I did in the US and free healthcare. The weather can be a downer, especially when I have to take the dog for a walk, and I have to take vitamin D supplements. I have some great friends and a boyfriend, 2 cats, a dog, car and a flat. Before I left the US, I was in retail and recently divorced, with maybe one friend, and I was living with my mom. And I have to take vitamin D supplements. You'd probably be doing that here too. It seems to have become a routine test, and prescribed supplements are the norm, since most people don't get enough in their diets and the sun isn't making up the difference. I know people who moved from the UK back to the US, and when they went to their doctor went apeshit about their vitamin D levels. Asked them what the hell they'd been doing for them to be solo living in England was their answer. Edit. And going off the topic, it's so bizarre for people to even know, let alone worry about their vitamin D thing. I think of all the things I've seen about Americans, that is the most American. I moved from America to Northern England around early December last year to finally live with my LDR spouse and partner of 6 years. I can say with confidence that I have gone to get doctor visits multiple times in the past couple of months at basically no cost. It's pretty surreal and awesome. Also, the food in general is much better, as far as quality and taste goes. But you have to go shopping every few or couple of days, because they don't last on the shelf for as long. I also really like how public transport is everywhere. It's not always perfect, buses often are late and even broke down once. But it's a step up from having no car in the USA and being helpless lol. I love that one of your negatives is that the food has fewer preservatives, so you have to shop more often. Close bracket. Oh yeah. I know logically that it's a good thing, but it still throws my American brain off. Like, we got this bread loaf just a week ago. It's totally stale. Most people have said they lose weight, become somewhat more mindful of their language and posture, and some finally have something to talk about. Yes, there isn't as much bullshitting where I live. You have to say what you mean and mean what you say. People want evidence and will only debate on evidence. Oh yeah, prove it. Just a clarification. The US allows dual citizenship. That means you don't have to forego your American citizenship if you become a citizen of another country. Conversely, if you have a citizenship from another country, you don't have to forego your birth citizenship to become an American citizen. It gets complicated when the country you are aspiring the citizenship, or the country of your citizenship from birth, do not allow for elective dual citizenship. Elective meaning when you choose to become a citizen of another country. This is to differentiate from natural right citizenship. For instance, the child of a Brazilian who was born in the US naturally has a dual citizenship, American and Brazilian. Another thing to keep in mind is that many countries, including the US, have residency that do not require citizenship. In other words, you can become a resident and legally live and work in that country, As far as I know, no residency requires someone to forego their citizenship of birth. In summary, are there ex-Americans? Possibly. What's the likelihood you'll find an ex-American? Unlikely. Sorry to diverge from the topic. What's the likelihood you'll find an ex-American? Unlikely. It's quite common for people living in Switzerland to relinquish American citizenship for two reasons: American income tax on global income, and FATCA complicating access to financial services. Life in New Zealand is amazing. The work-life balance feels, balanced. And I've had many more opportunities to go traveling, ironically, since NZ is about as far as possible from anywhere else. But the biggest change is probably becoming apparent. New Zealand offers free IVF to citizen/permanent residents if they meet qualifying criteria. I would not have been able to afford treatment in the US. Still American. But I've lived outside of the US for nearly 10 years in 3 different countries in Europe and Asia and am currently. It's certainly interesting, and being able to travel to other countries easily is awesome. It's also kind of a pain in the ass as you have to deal with taxes in US and your host country, and constantly have to deal with immigration and visas, etc. It's kind of a nightmare in that regard. For me at least. I just hate that shit. Overall it's pretty good. I'm thinking of coming back soon though actually. Like most PPL here. Still American. Just live in Australia. I'm so much happier and less stressed than in America. My employer treats me with respect. No doctor's notes. No guilt trip if I want to see my kid run in the school sports carnival. I went from being the right-wing Republican my parents raised me to a huge advocate for universal healthcare and sensible gun control, because I live in a country where both have been implemented and both have improved the lives of the people who live here. Also, preferential voting is amazing, and I think it is superior to first past the post. Everything is a bit more expensive here. That's the biggest downside. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.